World literature, changing trends. The dominance of English. I would call upon the panel on the stage, Mr. Arthur Duff, Mr. Fabrice Menge, Mr. Tuhin Sinha, Dr. Vilpa Patel, and the panel would be moderated by Ms. Neeta Khurana. The dominance of English literature in the academic circles cannot be undermined, but at the same time, it cannot be considered as the only source of avant-garde literature available for usage in this world. Literature is without borders and is indigenous to each nation with its own style of narration. With the advent of technology, the access to world literature has increased, and literary festivals such as the Ahmedabad International Literature Festival go on to prove that there are other literary forms other than English literature also. The panel gathered here today will talk about the relevance of world literature and deliberate on the changing trends. The panel consists of, and I'll go by alphabetical order, Mr. Arthur Duff, Professor and Area Chair for Furniture Design at CEPT University. He has over 25 years experience in architecture, interior design and design and manufacture of furniture and other products. Welcome, sir. Mr. Fabrice Menge is the Director's Assistant of Alliance Francaise Ahmedabad, the official French cultural center of Ahmedabad, and he's always been passionate about the discourses on relationship between literature and society. Mr. Tuhin Sinha is among the best-selling authors in India, a columnist, a screenwriter, and of many TV shows. His books include That Thing Called Love, The Captain of Love and Politics, The Edge of Desire, and The Edge of Power. We also have on our panel with us today Dr. Vilpa Patel, a global citizen. She's been in the pharmaceutical sector for more than 13 years now. She proposed and executed the first of its kind critical care internship program for her university and the state of Gujarat. She has vast experience in her sector, which ranges from being a guest lecturer in top universities to clinical practice in hospital area. She also has led education efforts in 2 states in the United States of America for the diabetes franchisee of AstraZeneca, one of the largest pharma companies. Apart from all this, she is also one of the organizing team members at AILF and been a key member in putting together pre-events such as First Uber Drive for Literature in Ahmedabad and First Changemakers event for literature in the city. The panel would be moderated by Ms. Neeta Khurana, a senior faculty in the Department of Language, Literature and Aesthetics at Pandit Deen Dayal Petroleum University. She's worked extensively in the area of gender studies, culture studies and translation theories in India and abroad. Women's self-narratives is her area of interest, which she passionately pursues. Thank you, panel members, and I would now give the mic away to the moderator.
Thank you so much. Firstly, thank you to the organizers, Mr. Yadav, Amrita, the whole team. It has been an interesting journey since morning. And very interestingly, you put world literature at the end because all of it has been touched upon in the various sessions that you have had. Panelists, I would start by saying that literature is luxury. All of us who have waited till here are extremely rich because people who have time to read, to dwell, to ponder, to discuss, debate, to construct are the ones who are truly rich at heart and in every other sense because they are the ones who are what we call now as global citizens with whom I am sitting right now. All of them are people who have traveled a lot, are there in various capacities. His work has been translated in many vernacular languages. He's been well read everywhere. Professor Duff has been traveling. He's a chair professor at CEPT University. Fabrice is into political science, studying a student, yet a student. yes, he's studying politics, and we cannot live without politics in our lives in every sense of the word. Every book of art literature has political connotations, and because it is open to interpretations. Vilma, very interestingly, when I was reading her brief as to what she has written about herself is incidentally a doctorate. The rest, she is everything else, with the food connoisseur to art to culture to education, unbelievable amount of versatility that she holds. So I'm very interested in knowing how the panel thinks about, we have been hearing people as to first and foremost what world literature is, how we look at it. It is literature which has transgressed the boundaries and is relevant. Being a professor of literature, I will not give a lecture on literature. I will try not to color it with my gender theories because that is my passion. So I will just try. That becomes a habit, you see, when you start writing and autobiographies per se. When I published my own autobiography too, so it becomes terrible. So I've had a brief about line of discussions which, sorry to say, but not a lot of controversy has arisen since morning. So that is an interesting part of everything. Everybody has been so sweet since morning. Everybody is hunky-dory. I would want to start here by saying that when we talk of world literature, how do you see your work being accepted abroad, and how do you see, are people open to accepting things written by an Indian abroad? How easy it is for you to enter that market?
Well, I mean, we've always been fascinated by foreign authors. The reason why Indian books over a period of time haven't really picked up in terms of sales in India. Insofar as Indian authors reaching out to foreign audiences is concerned, there are authors who get picked up, but frankly, I mean, I would not make the extra effort to reach out because we have an existing market in the country. Insofar as the Indian market is concerned, over the last 3 decades or so, ever since I have followed the Indian market, I think we've always had 2 parallel forms of writers existing, just like we have 2 parallel forms of economy which has existed in the country, the cash economy and the electronic economy lately. We've had writers who have solely written, I won't call it frivolous, but easy to consume stuff, and writers who have woven a lot of social backdrop into their writing across the last 3 decades. Salman Rushdie always coexisted with the Khushwant Singh. Today, Chetan Bhagat always coexists with many other serious writers. So that's the way it has been.
That is not a serious writer. Sorry. But okay, the fact remains that again, when I talk about politics of writing here in world literature too, India has been projected by all these authors that Arundhati Roy, Amitabh Ghosh, Salman Rushdie in a certain light, which sets. So when you look at people back in your countries, when they are writing literature, are they writing literature keeping what sells in mind? Is writing being taken as a profession by the youth there, and how and why? And are they thinking about keeping sensibilities across the globe in their writing, or are they limited to their worlds and paradigms?
Arthur Duff is Anandam, agus tá buíochas le dia, mar obair ag Seft University. Mar an am Arthur J. Nobody got what So I'm just introducing myself in Irish and in Gujarati. So first of all, we're being global in that sense, and we're connecting. So just with respect to being Irish and what Irish and literature means, so I think it's actually a little bit interesting to dwell on that. Yes, we have our own language through a wonderful process of colonization, wonderful in inverted commas. We assumed the English language as well, as you have in India. So we have this wonderful opportunity of playing with language. So we come with a whole set of values and ways of expressing ourselves in our bags. We then have the benefit of another set of values and ways of expressing. So what we do with that is so interesting. And I think within the context of Ireland, what's happened is that from this tiny little country, which has had quite a tough history, it projected out people into the world. So how many of you know and are quite familiar with Yeats, George Bernard Shaw, James Joyce, Samuel Beckett? All these people came from Ireland and left. So for whatever reason, Ireland made them, and then they developed themselves and expressed themselves abroad. But Ireland stayed with them. So being global has been something that Irish people have actually been very much familiar with and easy with. So, and then up to the present day, I'm sure some of you are familiar with Colin Tobin, whose book Brooklyn has been made into quite a popular film. In America being tied together wonderfully. Because, of course, you're all familiar with Seamus Heaney, who unfortunately died quite recently, one of our Nobel laureates and our national poet. So that continues, that the connection between Ireland and the world. So with respect to our young people, there's tremendous inspiration by authors and writers for them to be very serious about writing as a way of expressing themselves and tale-telling. And the connection also, so fundamentally with Gujarat, is that we love talking. So, our wonderful speaker that puts us all into shame, Mr. Gadri, who actually never stopped, never she wouldn't stop, we identified so strongly with. And I'm only madly jealous that I can't wave my hand in the air and start swinging like him. But anyway, maybe I will. Stop at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. I totally agree with what Mr. Garvey did. He touched the souls, despite the fact that many of us possibly did not understand the lyrics. But then that is what literature is. He was a performer and he did it to the best. Excellent. Coming back to Fabrice, when we talk about sociology and literature, like I said, literature reflects life. It is a criticism of life. So when you're reading text, mostly the philosophers from abroad have been able to make inroads more so and first so than the writers did. We have Goethe from Germany talking to Eckermann in 1827 talking about global citizenship. He said this is the way to go. We have Kafka, we have Thoreau, Gandhiji got influenced by Thoreau. The name droppings of great men can go on and on if I were to talk about it. So when we're talking about life for life's sake and life for art's sake, what Mr. Gargi did in the previous section was, he was talking about art for life's sake. It is, you feel safe, because still it is the world language. Everything has to be translated in English for us to understand. So how do you take, what is your perspective as a sociologist, so as to say, on literature, language, and how it is conveyed as a core literature?
Bonsoir tout le monde. Je suis Fabrice. I'm not sure I completely understood this question. Are you speaking about translation issues?
This translation language is political again. It is the whole. We are colonized in the sense of thinking language literature through English. And if I may add again, being a professor here. So Dryden fought the French way of thinking when he said that we want to make it more British. He's the father of modern criticism in England. Right, so he wanted to reclaim English. Like here, if when Professor Morris speaks in Gujarati, everybody is happy. I know he's studied in CEPT. He has done his education at CEPT and then became a professor here. He knows Gujarati. And very interestingly, he referred to Mr. Yadav as Bhai and he writes his mail to him, so we were in the same group. So it was very fascinating and sweet to see that. So we immediately connect here. So when I talk about language, when English gets translations happen, how do you see that? Should the vernacular continue in world literature? How do we read? What are the options that we can think about? What are the solutions? Should we have a text which has 2 sides or 3 sides to it, that one in the vernacular, one in English, or us to translate? How do you think, or do you think on those lines?
I still don't get exactly the question. So maybe I can answer about the question you asked to Mr. Duff, which is about is literature career an option in France? I would say that the literature career, is now less recognized in France. Authors have less ambition, we don't find any Victor Hugo who will say, I want to be Chateaubriand or nothing. Chateaubriand being a really, really famous French author. Politics are not showing, are not putting forward literature anymore. François Mitterrand or Jacques Chirac, former French president, were often referring to literature in their speech. Now, Nicolas Sarkozy or François Hollande gives a smaller importance to literature. There's multiple barriers if you want to be an author in France. Social barrier that you can encounter in many countries, which is concerning education, concerning means, about only certainly percent of writers come from popular classes. As well, there's no specific training for author in France. You will not find a university course for being an author. And you will find this in the United States or in Great Britain. It is actually developing now, but it is really not yet.
Alright, thank you. Wilpa, I would want to ask you for education with students. What do you think are the main trends? What are the genres that the young children are looking at and studying? Because Japan has taken over the cartoon industry majorly with the manga series coming in. There is fan fiction, there is cyberpunk, there is this button poetry kind of thing, the slam dunk poetry. The children are reading crazy stuff, K-pop, things like that, which is it is an alien language for me. For me to understand what children are doing, it is totally alien. How do you think? What are the genres that are there in world literature which have taken over the society and specifically the young at heart that way? Do you think there's a shift?
So there's that's an excellent question, by the way, thanks. So there's as far as genres that are concerned from an American perspective, I don't think the youth is looking at different genres at this point, to be quite frank. To kind of piggyback off of some of the panels that we had today in terms of short-term memory. Yeah, so, and something what Louise said, that not many youth are looking into literature as a career. Okay, but as far as literature is concerned, they kind of waver towards empowering words, empowerment. That's, something that I've seen in poetry slams. For instance, I'll tell you, in Manhattan, where I did most of my professional journey, you will see poetry slams from all walks of life, and that's a melting pot of the world, right? So you see the Spanish, you see the Irish, you see the Cape Verdeans, people that you've never Guyanese. All of them are gathering at Lower East Side bars, and they're doing poetry slams, okay? And most of the words are about empowering themselves or empowering each other. Or one trend I also find is catharsis. So they use the words as a catharsis, an experience to kind of bleed out their emotions, bleed out their pain, and to connect with each other. And that's one thing that I've seen. If you don't mind, just give me a couple of seconds. I want to share something with you. There are two things that kind of connect with the youth in America, which represent a lot of the global cultures. And one of the poems, I'm taking a few lines from Maya Angelou's poem, And I Still Rise, right? You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I rise. Okay? So that explains the youth in America. As far as my understanding is concerned, the youth in Manhattan, the youth in Boston, where the majority of my experience has been. So I can't really generalize more than that. And one other thing that I want to share with you in my short research that I did, was that recently, during the Ukrainian Civil War, there was a guy, and he was a journalist, and his name is Ole, and I can't really pronounce his last name. And he wrote a novel on Facebook during the protests, okay? And what he was doing was, it was cathartic, right? It was cathartic, so he was writing about his experiences piece by piece, and essentially why was he doing that piece by piece on Facebook was to evade censors, to evade the government, you know? And this is what the future youth is about, and someone caught hold of it and basically put it into a big novel, and it's printed now. So this is what I've seen.
Very interestingly, this also brings me to the thought of the publishing industry, because times in 1700s and times in the 21st century have changed. There when the manuscript was handwritten, and then before the printing press, somebody in the previous panel talked about it. And now we can, at the click of a button, the outreach is amazing, and therefore we cannot even take it back, because it is going to live there somewhere in some ways. So when that shift has taken place, when we are reading not actual books, they go back to books is the call of the day. We are actually reading things on our technology. I mean, I still cannot think on a computer. I have to write my manuscripts and everything and then work. So this shift, this whole publishing industry, in fact, one of my students is doing research and on the way publishing industry has changed, because they feel that in Goodreads, if you have a certain number of likes, your book gets published. And this question will have to go to him, because a number of my students want to become published authors while they are studying, while they are in their undergrad programs, and they actually send you chapters of who you to review. And any advice that you would want to give them, because today's child is thinking too far, too fast. They are not even their age. They are grown-ups like crazy. So what would your advice be to these citizens who are thinking globally all the time?
When you talk about digital media, in fact, I have just written a book which is going to be published by a publishing house which will operate via an app. So the book would be only available through the app and through Kindle. So when the offer first came to me, I was very surprised. I was not open to the idea, but then I was surprised that the deal I was getting was probably as lucrative or slightly more lucrative than what a conventional publisher would have offered. So this probably explains the advent of digital media as a alternative book publishing. Even though I'm slightly skeptical of its acceptance immediately, maybe it's still going to take a few years before India warms up, much of our population warms up to that idea. Insofar as the youth wanting to embrace or wanting to become authors as early as 15, 16 is concerned, some possibly can pull it off. But personally, my suggestion would be, precautiousness often doesn't do you much good. It can often be counterproductive. So the whole desperation to get published, the difference between, I've been around for 10 years now, my first book came out in 2006. So the whole difference in these 10 years in wanting to get published and in being published is that it's that much easier to get published now, but it's that much more difficult to, leave a mark, to create a mark for yourself. So if you're just wanting to, it's like, you want to play for the country, you want to break into the national team, but then I think just merely playing a few one-day matches, being there is what you want, or are you preparing yourself for the long haul? So that precautiousness is something which I would not encourage. If it happens naturally, great. But otherwise, I think students should wait for their time and prepare themselves for the long haul.
So, I suppose there are many narrow ways of expressing oneself, and with respect to young people, clearly music is the vehicle that so many young people attach themselves to, and to that extent, how global that has become. So, again, with respect to Ireland, some of you might have heard of a group called U2, who've had a global impact coming from Ireland itself, and whose message is, in that sense, not Irish at all, but identifies with what people are feeling and aspiring to. So I think music, in a way, has taken elements of literature and universalized aspirations and feelings that people have. So whether it may start in a slam, a poetry slam in New York, then the way in which things like that get taken up and represented, reprocessed, but that music is a wonderful vehicle for literature. So, I mean, I think what we're looking at is not the reduction of what it is to be Irish or to be Gujarati, but how actually we may share and support each other with matters that concern us all. So I'd be very positive. I'm sad, of course, that bookshops close, but I think what matters is that people continue to find a way to express themselves, and that is actually what matters. It's the desire to express, it's the vehicle to express, and when that stops happening, we need to be really worried.
Well, I would agree with Mr. Duff, as music is a perfect way to convey love messages. And I'm quite happy that Bob Dylan got this prize because it's a recognition of all his work and all his year for this spread of music everywhere. So this would be my opinion.
You know, this is a question that there's no right answer to, right? But I'll tell you what, I think this is a music is literature in itself, right? You know, you have hip hop, you have Dylan, you have country music. I personally like country music, and I'm the odd person out in my friend circle. But I don't listen to Dylan a lot, but here's an article that I read in protest to Dylan winning the Nobel Prize this year. And I'll just leave it up to you guys to decide what the correct answer is. And I forget, it's an African author, and I forget his name. So the article essentially said that initially when Nobel wanted to create the prize in his name, it was for some writers of literature that will change or impact for the long haul, that will change the society, that will give back to the society, right? Enhance goodness within the society. And that's what Nobel himself represented, and that's what he wanted the prize to be for. So this article talked about this African author who has brought about a lot of changes, and I wish I could think of him, and we don't really have a lot of time, but if you can just Google it. And they said, why not this person? Why Dylan? Right? And I'll leave it up to you guys to decide, why not him? And then you'll have another lot that will say, well, why not Dylan? He actually does make an impact on the youth, and he has changes in his own little way. Okay, so I know it's a vague answer.
But I guess we'll take it. But the fact is that Bob Dylan getting the Nobel has opened the vistas for the students now for their kind of research. I'm again guiding a child who is doing work on South Korean serials, you know. So they said if Bob Dylan can do it, why can't we study it as literature? Another child is doing it in Hindi classical music, you know. So it has just opened the vistas as for us as literature persons to reach out more and look at it as part of our own the canopy under which we are studying. So I guess that is where the rest of the debate carries on. I would want to ask all of you to let me know what you think, whether literature or world literature per se, helps in bridging the cultural relations between nations. We have had this major debate recently that certain Pakistanis should not be allowed and the rest. What would your take be? Should literature be part of that, or should it go beyond those boundaries?
But if you look at in that context, Pakistani artists or Pakistani people, so if you talk in that particular context, I think that would depend a lot on the prevailing situation in the country. Situation, yes, I would not support them. But largely when you talk about literature bridging gaps between two different societies, I think most of the Indian authors who have gained fame and name internationally weave those two cultures. Jhumpa Lahiri, or even a Pakistani author called Mohsin Hamid, whose books I've read and followed closely. So that's where weaving two cultures or weaving two societies help And most of the authors, or the Indian, or I guess the Pakistani authors who are famous internationally, are the ones who probably stayed in a different country for most of the time. And that's where weaving in two different backdrops has really played a role in bridging two societies and cultures.
Some of you might be aware that we had our own freedom struggle in terms of sharing histories, and then for a period of about 25 years in Ireland, we had an extraordinary struggle between North and South Ireland. We had a partition, we had a border. So it's a horrific history, and I won't go into that now, but Seamus Heaney, again a poet of incredible sophistication, was an extraordinary force, a positive force in terms of managing to find a line, find a way for people to find some strength, some support, some hope in the context of this awful political and violent situation. So it's not perhaps answering your question, but I think the importance of literature and that desire to express cannot be underestimated. And through people of this kind, we grow and we go beyond. So there's a political dimension, then there's also the dimension of something that's much greater, and hopefully those people embody that.
Cultural relations can be bridged through with literature. Literature can make a better understanding of the other culture, of the other people, but it can as well create a common culture. France, before being United Nations, used to be really divided, and through the big houses, national houses, it has been brought together. Literature as well, through, for example, Harry Potter, it can create a common ground. For example, when I meet Indian people, they often tell me, I look at Harry Potter, I understand them, we've got common culture.
So I think the short answer is yes. I firmly believe literature can connect different cultures and different nations. But the question remains, before that, prior to that even, is whether you want to connect with the different cultures, right? So for example, newspapers, journalism is literature in itself, At some point in my time, I was obsessed with Middle East politics. Especially Israeli politics, Palestinian. So what I used to do is I used to consciously take up newspapers that were Israeli, constantly take up newspapers that were Lebanese and Palestinian. So I know different viewpoints because I wanted to understand that and I wanted to connect to the culture. So yes, that's one answer. The second answer is to kind of piggyback of what Ruhin was saying about Pakistan, Unfortunately, my memory is not good to remember poetry and nazms and everything. So there was one nazm that I was reading from Gulzar, listening to Gulzar's nazm on YouTube. And I went through the whole thing. It was so beautiful, yeah? I went through the whole thing and I got goosebumps and I said, my God, he's talking about his lover. I wish my lover would talk about me like this, yeah? And at the end, he hit us with a bang, and he was talking about Pakistan, right? So here's bridging that, and then there's another one which I believe Gulzar has, he's a fan of this author, and this author wrote this book called Aur Kitne Pakistan. Okay, I don't remember his last name, but when I started reading this book, and that was to practice my own Hindi in reading skills, and I started to find out about the relationship between Great Britain and India during the partition. And he's done so much historical research in this book that you start questioning, well, is history actually the truth? So these kind of bridging, understanding partitions, understanding each other is there, but the first question lies between us is that whether if we want to connect with others.
I want to just summarize a few takeaways for the audience and for us to through the small discussion that I had and to make a few points. Please make the organizers, please make this event a 3-day or a 7-day affair. This is zero justice to what the topic was, one. Secondly, for young aspiring authors, hold your horses, take your time, be interested into research. Don't just research on the surface level. Deeper art, architecture, literature, history of the world is what you need to know to get your facts right, to base your fiction on, which is important. Thirdly, when I talk about bridging cultural relationships through literature, there is always hope and realities that the boundaries are fluid now. They are no more limited to through geographical boundaries with the digital media. So nobody can, harness this energy of love that is there, which is going to transgress boundaries. I still get invited to talk about self-narratives by Indian women in American universities, and take lectures there. They are interested in how gender is changing. So that is there. And finally, when we come to reading, there is definitely hope. In Lisbon, Bertrand still stands tall and strong, the oldest bookstore in the world, and is thriving, and everybody is going there visiting, and since ages and ages it stands there. So the books will never die. People's hearts, emotions never die. Things connect to us, and nobody can take emotions from living, breathing souls in this world. So world literature becomes important because by default, all of us are global citizens. I don't think anybody was so interested in the American election the way the youth was. We had a major session auditorium of 600-800 seats filled up with kids talking, discussing that. So everybody is affected because you're reaching out. The world is a very small place now. So you cannot just get away by not knowing what is happening in the world. The trends are there to see, to tap, to make the most of. Thank you panelists for your time, and thank you audience for being the lovely audience. Thank you so much.
So the panel just proves that about Martin Heidegger's statement when he says a boundary is not that at which something stops, but that from which something begins is present sense. Certainly, world literature, in fact, music or any art form has no boundaries. Thank you very much to the panelists and the moderator. I'll ask Fari to present them with the memento as a token of our gratitude. Fari, can you please present them with the memento? Thank you very much. I would request the moderator to escort the panelists off the stage.